Welcome to the Darkstream. Vox Day, voxday.net, and unauthorized.tv. Welcome, Virgil Kane. Finally caught one live. Coyote Jack says audio is good, video is good. The DLive chat is rolling. The unauthorized chat is live, and super chats are active. So, what do I mean by the cleansing fires of France? What are they cleansing? They're certainly not ethnic cleansing, not yet, although that is certainly one possible scenario in the not too distant future. What we're actually talking about is the fires are cleansing the retardery and foolishness of the very, very ignorant, very, very stupid people of the West. I don't think any of us fully understand how utterly and absolutely retarded the average individual in any of the so-called liberal democracies is. And I'm not talking about the fact that the majority of the people in all these countries were dumb enough to allow themselves to be injected with some unknown substance of dubious benefit and probable harm to them, although you could certainly cite that as evidence. I'm talking about the utter lunacy, the utter cluelessness involved in embracing mass immigration. Mass immigration has never, ever, in the entire course of history, benefited the people who accepted the immigrants. Go back to Egypt. How did it work for Egypt? By the time the Israelis left, they all lost their firstborn sons. Wasn't so good for the Canaanites either when the Israelites showed up. As for the Israelites themselves, the Roman immigration wasn't so great for them. In fact, until very, very recently, the movement of peoples was synonymous with lots of wars taking place. A lot of people don't realize that Alaric the Goth, who sacked Rome, was either one of the immigrants or a first-generation descendant of the immigrants, not just immigrants, the refugees who were permitted to escape the Huns and cross the Rhine by the Roman Emperor Valens. Valens himself died at the hands of those refugees, and Rome was ultimately sacked. So all of these ridiculous arguments, it's good for the economy, we have to help people. You know, what are we going to do? They're starving. Okay, let's compare the difference between Somalia and China, or Somalia and Nigeria. Jay Bila says, you don't see Russia, China, Japan, Iran bringing in outsiders like the West. Yes, because those are countries that plan to survive. But better yet, China was in an objectively worse position than many of the countries from which these refugees presently hail. Now, would the Chinese have benefited if the West had taken a whole bunch of Chinese people in? No. They built up their nation. They built up their culture. They didn't make the mistake of accepting the various globalist lies about free trade and free speech and free expression. Pretty much, if it begins with free, it's bad, it's evil, and it's societally destructive. Quite possibly even decivilizational. France has been the most multicultural of all the Western democracies. And we're seeing firsthand what the results of that are. Democracy is awful. Representative democracy is arguably worse than democracy. Think about this. Democracy is so awful that some of its foremost champions had to design a system to limit it strictly, just to prevent it from destroying the society. Then, in the interest of expanding democracy, the franchise was expanded well beyond the, mature, successful, landowning white men. And the more it was expanded, the worse the society got. It's now at the point where these liberal democracies are on the edge of complete and comprehensive failure. It's not burning. Moscow's not burning. Beijing's not burning. But Minneapolis was. Portland was. Paris is. The ancients understood, the Greeks understood, the Romans understood that democracy was just a phase. And it was generally considered to be among the worst phases. Now we're beginning to understand why. But the fires of Paris, if they continue, will continue to burn away the lies, the nonsense, the retardery, and the foolishness. Every Frenchman, every actual Frenchman, because black people are not French. Africans are not French, just as French are not Africans. The British did not become American Indians by virtue of landing in the New World. The Jamaicans who came to Britain on the Windrush generation, they call it, they're not British. Their children aren't British. Their grandchildren aren't British, and never will be. They may end up conquering and ruling the land that used to be called Britain, but you know what? They'll almost certainly give it a different name. Drop Bear says the MSM can only say the French are rioting and then carefully not show their faces in the videos. Of course they, this confusion of the nation with the state is purposeful, it's misleading, and it just leads to horrifically bad decisions. Most U.S. citizens are not Americans. Most U.S. citizens have zero connection to the posterity of the Founding Fathers. Zero. Quebec brought in Haitians because they speak French. Montreal is a hellhole now. Yeah, that's... People live how they prefer to live. And that is their right. The Africans and the Arabs who have invaded France no more want to live like French people than the French people who invaded Algeria or the Ivory Coast want to live like the people who live there. This is not rocket science. This is not a difficult concept. The dirt isn't magic. The Romans didn't become Hebrews when they invaded Judea. You know, the French didn't become Vietnamese when they invaded Indochina. The mainstream media talks endlessly about threats to our democracy. Good. The sooner democracy dies, the better. The democracy is one of the lies that these fires are burning away. Democracy helped lead to that. Ergo, it is bad. Ladumba says it's even hard for Poles to understand the connection of state-nation when talking to Poles who live or are born in different countries to Polish families. Of course. The more identity complicated you are, the harder it is for you to speak truthfully about anything. You know, I am identity complicated. Yeah. Am I Native American? Am I American? Am I Swiss? The answer to all of those questions can be yes. But at the same time, the answer to all those questions can be no. And, you know, the reality is that societies can accept newcomers at the margins if they have enough similarities, if they want enough of the same things. But it's just not possible to bridge certain gaps. It's not, you know, it's said that you're not even able to communicate accurately across a 2SD IQ gap. That's 30 points. The average intelligence of the Africans is, you know, very, very close to that. And that's the ability to communicate. What are the chances that you want the same things? What are the chances that you have the same capacities? Dan in Georgia says, I'm probably more Irish than any of the new Irish in Ireland, and I've never been there. Yeah. You know, I mean, the truth is the truth. Sorry, Vox. He lived in Little Italy in Montreal, and I don't sound or act anything close to the Italians I grew up around. No, I wouldn't expect so. I'm not Italian. Never will be. Not even if I go and live in Milano for the rest of my life. You know, there's not necessarily anything wrong with some level of migration. There is a certain amount of benefit that can can come to a population if it is done wisely and well. But opening up the borders to all comers clearly does not benefit anybody in the population being invaded, except for perhaps for a few well-connected people who are somehow financially benefiting from the treasonous policies of the government. Umber Kid says, every day I start to see things more your way. I'm Ethiopian living in America, and I don't see myself as Ethiopian more than American, but I have to wait for the next part. I know a lot of others that can't see themselves as American. Well, the thing is, Umber Kid, you're not and you never will be American. You have no connection whatsoever to the founding fathers. Now, by the same token, there's a lot of other people who think they're Americans who also have no connection to it and have no understanding of the values and do not share any of the ideas of the founding fathers. You know, now, you know, you are where you are, but it's not going to stay the way that it is forever. You know, the French, it's unlikely, it's possible, but it's unlikely that the French, the Swedes, the Norwegians, the Swiss, the Italians, that they're all just going to allow themselves to be, you know, that they're just going to throw their hands up and die off peacefully. You know, we are long overdue for a series of very, very nasty wars of ethnic cleansing. You know, and they're not as far off as people think. They're not as long ago as people think. Read about the partition of India and Pakistan. You know, if you look at the way that history has always sorted out, is eventually the populations get moved one way or another. You know, the reason that Lombardia, the region in northern Italy, is called Lombardia is because the Lombard tribe invaded them. You know, Umberkid says, I love this country very much, but when things go sideways, I know I will be seen as an enemy simply by the jersey I gotta wear. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but it's the way that it is. You know, and the thing is, you can wish people well without trying to claim that you're one of them. You know, the whole concept of, well, it's an idea nation is so utterly stupid that it is amazing that anyone, including myself when I was younger, ever accepted it. A nation is by birth and not a place. No chances. How should the next French president handle the migrants? They need to start systematically repatriating them. You know, if they have to they can just DNA test them all, and you send them. You send each individual to whatever state is most closely related to their DNA. And of course, there'll be all the sob stories about, oh, but they don't speak the language or this or that. I think it doesn't matter. The French president's job is to do what is best for the French people. You know, I don't believe that it is good or necessary to treat people violently or cruelly. You know, there's no reason why they can't be treated decently and well and sent back to where they belong. Now, obviously, there's going to be some level of violence. But there already is. What's the fear? They might riot? You're already there. You know, and the violence is going to get a lot worse if the invasion is permitted to continue. Umberkid says, thank you for helping me come to terms with it, Vox. It hurts, but life goes on. God bless you. You as well. And I understand. You know, it is difficult to not belong, especially if you're in a place that you'd rather belong, right? But we don't choose our blood. We don't choose who we are, what we are. I mean, the sad thing is that, you know, a good, intelligent, well integrated person like you wouldn't be a problem in a small number that could be reasonably absorbed by the population. But when you're one of 80,000 people parachuted into a single city of very, very different people, you know, I mean, that's so obviously non-viable that you have to seriously question, and I think we're well beyond the questioning point, but we're speaking generally here. You have to seriously question what the original objective of the people who came up with that idea was. And don't get me wrong, all the Norwegians and all the Swedes and all the Germans who live in Minnesota, none of them are Americans either. They have never, ever understood the first thing about limited government. You know, they've never understood the English principles. They've never valued them any more than the Somalians do. Frankly, an Ethiopian like Umberkid probably has a better grasp on some of those concepts because of the way he talks about these things. He probably has a better concept of some of those concepts than the average, Scandinavian has ever had. But it's not about the ideas. It's not about, I used to give Sarah Hoyt a lot of flack, and in fact, she completely broke off communications with me because I would make fun of her. I'm an American born in Portugal. Like, how are you an American? How are you an American when all you want to do is talk about what life was like in Portugal and how you're educating all the Americans about what Portugal is like? Like, is that what Americans do? Oh, well, the ideas of Robert Heinlein really appeal to me. Well, great, but so what? What nation are you if the ideas of Karl Marx appeal to you? What nation are you if the ideas of J.K. Rowling appeal to you? How is that relevant? And eventually you get to I identify as American. But, Muammar Gaddafi took the idea and pushed it to his extremists and basically said, America belongs to everyone. Belongs to everyone. Well, if that's true, then it doesn't belong to Americans, does it? Ergo, it can't be true. And I mean, it's a bit ironic because people will ask me, well, how can you be so harsh about this stuff? And but you're friends with this person from Senegal and you're friends with this person from Congo or whatever. Macro's not micro. You have a responsibility to be decent to everybody. You have a responsibility. You should be friendly to everybody. That doesn't mean that you accept the destruction of the nation in which you live. Why is it an insult to not be American? It's not. There's no insult to it at all. But the problem is that people want to identify as Americans. I mean, I'm sure that back when Rome was the number one world power, everybody wanted to be Roman. In 20 years, probably everybody will want to be Russian. Maybe Chinese. I mean, that doesn't sound likely, but if you think it's impossible, then you haven't been in a haven't been an exchange student to Japan and seen seen the Weebos, or whatever you call them, wearing their kimonos and doing their tea ceremony every afternoon. I mean, it struck us as ridiculous, of course, because it was unusual. But how is that any different than the guy from Guatemala who moves to the United States and suddenly starts wearing a baseball cap and claiming he's the biggest Knicks fan ever? It's no different. It's exactly the same thing. It's just as much of a joke. But, America has been, the United States has been more invaded than most. And the American nation has been the most denationalized in the world. And that's why it's so difficult for Americans to even understand what they are. Yeah, everybody wanted to be British in 1900. Powers of Bear said Steiner did call it 100 plus years ago. West going down and East rising up. Wheels have been turning for a while. Yeah, I mean, Napoleon called China the sleeping dragon. So, so what I encourage you to do, all of you, is try to be as decent as you can be in the coming times. Because it's not, there's going to be a lot of indecency and inhumanity, and the longer that that clown world manages to keep the current system in place, the worse it's going to be when it finally collapses. Back in the 50s, Eisenhower was able to deport 1.3 million Mexicans very quickly with no violence. Now you're talking about 50 million people. Probably not going to happen without violence. But if it doesn't happen, the whole system's going to collapse. So all we can do is wait, watch, and pray. So on a lighter note, how many of you here are subscribed to Castalia history? We've been talking a little bit about history. And if you are a Castalia history subscriber, how many of you would like to know the next book in the series? Oh, noblesse oblige. We have an annual subscriber in the house. Very impressive. Let's see. I'll show you a picture. We'll see if anyone can identify it. So this was going to be the third book, but for reasons that I'll describe in a minute, and I'll also be sending out the emails tomorrow. Annie says, evening all, she just subscribed. So this will be the first book that you'll receive, Annie, and you'll be among the first to know which one it is. Can anyone identify this book? To give you a further clue, it just entered the public domain in 2023. Well, this is the first volume of the shorter Cambridge Medieval History. You see the green books behind me to my left? No, to my right, sorry, your left. The green books up there, those are the full-fledged Cambridge Medieval History. Now, we're not going to do a 12 volume set, not yet, and not for the whole subscription. So what I'm actually announcing today is books 2 and 3, which is to say volume 1 of the shorter Cambridge Medieval History, which is subtitled Volume 1, The Later Roman Empire to the 12th Century. And that runs, these are going to be some fat books. That one runs like 680 pages. And then Volume 2 is the 12th Century to the Renaissance. And this is the exact, this is a abridged version of the exact text that appears in the longer work. It's just a lot of it is removed. It also has, and I wish I'd known this before we had it scanned, a tremendous amount of illustrations, which which meant that we ended up paying a lot more to get this stuff scanned than we'd expected. So, so these are books 2 and 3 in the Castalia history. We're very much looking forward to getting them out there. In fact, they've already been printed, although we haven't printed book 1 yet. So we're working on those things. If you haven't subscribed, this is going to be one of the best, if not the best, history-related subscriptions that you can get. And I can personally vouch for the quality of this particular work. The Cambridge Medieval History has long been a favorite of mine. It was first published, they began publishing it in the 1920s. J.B. Editor was the chief, or sorry, J.B. Bury was the chief editor. This one was actually cut down by C.W. Pravite Orton. This version was originally published in 1952. But like I said, the text is almost entirely that was first being published in the 1920s. And so it's long, it's pre-converged. I mean, yes, the academics at the time, they were Enlightenment influenced figures. They were largely not Christians, but they were still culturally Christian. And so, they're really good works. They've done excellent stuff on the Nicene Creed, the development of the Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, some of the arguments of the. In fact, Jay Bila says, I'm just reading Volume 1, The Christian Empire in 1911. That's what I've got up there on my shelf. It really is an amazing read, and it covers levels of detail that are so much deeper than any history major or self-styled history expert on the internet is going to know. You'll probably understand why I was so amused by the whole idea of a Trinity debate between Jim, Bob, and Owen. If you read the section on the sorting out of the creed by the church hierarchy at the time. So anyhow, glad to hear that you guys are pleased by those announcements. And I'm hoping, I'm desperately hoping that we've printed enough books just in case. The subscription is going really well. In fact, much better than we expected at this point. I think we're already well over 450 subscribers. We might be pushing 500 by the end of the month. And so we're going to have to look at we're going to have to look at probably getting a few more of these printed somehow. So, Powers That Bear says Orthodox, because Orthodox is more aligned with Owen than Catholics anyway. If you're talking at that level of detail, you're not even part of the conversation, honestly. Wait, read the books, then you'll understand. So, also I've got some very cool things to show you today. And I think I mentioned that we bought this new machine that we believe was going to make it possible. It was going to make it possible for us to turn comics, or basically provide leather-bound comics at a reasonable price. The kind of books the kind of book blocks that you get from the high-end printers, the proper type of printers, is just it's not cost effective. And so we needed to try to figure out a way that we could get the book blocks from inexpensive paperbacks. And I'm very pleased to announce that we have figured out how to do that. So this is a leather-bound, there's no stampings on it yet, but this is a sewn and leather-bound copy of Flying Sparks 1, Volumes 1 and 2. Now that's, if you notice, this is Flying Sparks Volume 1, Flying Sparks Volume 2. And so what we've done is we've created a concept we call pseudo-signatures, and we can take two different sewn sections and attach them securely, which allows us to create books that are larger than the normal limit. No, we'll get to that in a minute. This is actually one that represents kind of the limit of the sewing machine. And what you'll notice is that we've actually created the end papers, right? So the end papers are attached. You can even see the sewing marks on the side. And this is Alt Hero Volume 1, the very timely War in Paris. And this is the first test. It's very good. We probably could go with this, but what we did here, you can just see on the edges, you can see how that we actually cut down that 10 millimeter white gap. We left it white so that we could see it. In this case, what we did is we cut the spine off, then we sewed it. What we've found, and I'll probably be able to show you at the next Darkstream, because we're testing it now. We found that we don't need to cut the spine off. We just need to rip the top off, and then we can sew it just inside the spine. That saves about 2 millimeters, which allows for a perfect image when we go all the way across, when we have a bleed that goes all the way across. Now this is quite good. There's not a single page where any of the balloons are lost in the gap, but the other way is better. The other approach is better. We've tried what we've been doing the last couple days, and what we'll be doing over the weekend is experimenting. So now we've proven we can do it. So now it's a question of how do we do it best. And so I think that this is going to be a real game changer for independent comics creators, because if they want to do a crowdfund and they want to do have a leather-bound option, they can contact us and we can arrange to provide it for them at a reasonable price. And then we have the same end papers on the back, as you can see. So, and then this is a bit of an abomination, but we just did it to test it. And because, with the one machine, we couldn't do something like Chuck Dixon's Avalon. It's too big. It's 308 pages. I think, well, don't think I have a copy here, but here we go. And as I will show you in a moment, we have Chuck Dixon's Avalon. Now that's even more than 308 pages. This has all 12 issues. What we did is this was actually cut down a bit, which we're not going to. We're going to do this in a different way. We tried this approach separately than the one that I just showed you. But what's significant about this is we actually added another 80 pages just because we had it printed out. So this is actually close to 400 pages in a secure, sewn, leather-bound book. So it's definitely got. Actually, we haven't finished this one. I can see that they didn't put the glue all the way through, but the point is that this is something that works. It says you showed a photo of storing your air compressor under your machine. Is that for storage? No, that's actually the tank. Oh yeah, that's it's not under the machine. That's the whole thing is the air compressor. So, yeah. So what this is going to allow us to do is omnibus tier stuff. So, we could theoretically, I wouldn't recommend it, but we could theoretically do 24 issue omnibuses in leather. I think we would highly recommend that people keep it to this, that people keep it to, in the 300 to 400 page range max. But it's an interesting approach. I think that this is something that is going to be very exciting for a lot of independent comics producers, and the quality. I mean, you've seen our stuff. I just saw a spelling error in Volume 1 Junior Classics. We're not going to redo the Junior Classics anytime soon. So, and especially if you just found one random one, it's only worthwhile if we have comprehensive lists, not just a random one. So, if you want to start with making a comprehensive list, send it to us when you're done. But don't just send us one error when you happen to find it. If we're going to reprint the Junior Classics at some point in time, then we'll put out a call. We'll ask for all the typos, etc., etc. Sir Bradley says, just subscribe to Castalia History. Let's go. Yeah, Sir Bradley, I don't know if you caught it, but the next two books will be the Cambridge Medieval History, Volumes 1 and 2. The shorter one, that's the complete one. Anyhow, I think that this is really going to allow the Castalia Bindery to do some interesting, excellent stuff, and this is going to be useful for people doing role-playing games. I actually talked to a well-known classic role-playing game designer, and he gave me permission to do some test bindings of his work just to see what it looks like. So once I've got my personal set, I mean, we don't even need to bother, right? But I suspect other people are going to want it too. Yep. So, I mean, also you might notice that this is slightly bigger than we previously did. So, anyhow. So, it's not all chaos and flames. There's good stuff happening. If we're going to preserve knowledge for the future, this is one way we can do it. We're also going to be working on that electronic system, but more about that some other time. Blee says, thank you for the updates. Very exciting to see the progress. I'm just very appreciative of the support that has made all of it possible. This is a community effort. I'm not a comics guy. I got into comics because you guys wanted me to help you do something in comics. Now we are. And so, and if you're a creator, if you're an independent comics producer, get in touch with us. We're just scratching the surface of what we're able to do. We're going to start doing some of the stuff with our Archaven Comics, right? But there's going to be different things that you're going to want to do, and I believe that there's going to be some interesting and exciting options that people are going to want to utilize. I'm Vox Day. This is the Darkstream.